Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper. 1 year into special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation, there is new reporting suggesting that another country may have tried to influence the U.S. presidential election. The New York Times is reporting that 3 months before the election, Donald Trump Jr. met with an emissary for two Gulf nations offering to help his father's campaign. It included a proposal for a social media manipulation campaign. And just a few minutes ago, President Trump seemed to respond to that story on Twitter, writing in part, quote, "The world's most expensive witch hunt has found nothing on Russia and me, so now they are looking at the rest of the world." I'm back with Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, the vice chairman of the Intelligence Committee. Senator, I want to get your reaction to this report. Were you aware of this other meeting Donald Trump Jr. had with some representatives of Gulf state nations? And is there any evidence that any of them actually followed through and did anything to help the Trump campaign?
I'm not going to comment about where we stand in terms of certain witnesses in our investigation, but if the Times story is true, we now have at least a second and maybe a third nation that was trying to lean in to this campaign. And I don't understand what the president doesn't get about the law that says if you have a foreign nation interfere in an American election, that's illegal.
But did it take place is the question.
I think the Times story, we'll see what follows after that. What we do know took place, though, is that Russia, a foreign adversarial nation, massively interfered in our elections, both in terms of leaking information on a selective basis, scanning 21 of our states' electoral systems, using social media in ways that were basically unprecedented. And they were doing it to not only sow disarray, but to help Trump and hurt Clinton. And that point was reconfirmed this week on a bipartisan basis
by your
the Senate Intelligence Committee.
So, but the big question is, did they do so with the assistance or participation of any American, especially and including people who are in the Trump campaign's orbit? And do you have an answer to that question? Because that's collusion. That's the collusion question.
That is clearly the end-point question that we're going to have to deal with.
But have you seen any evidence of it?
But what we do know, and we have seen evidence, matter of fact, the leaking of the transcripts from Donald Trump Jr. putting out by the Judiciary Committee shows clearly that the Trump campaign welcomed dirt on Hillary Clinton. Now, did the president know about that meeting or not? I don't know. I'd like to get the answer to that. I would also like to find out if there is this other pattern, if the Times story is accurate, and there's this pattern that other countries were offering, and clearly the Trump campaign was receptive to these kind of offers, how that is not the beginnings of evidence of stuff that needs to be investigated. And remember where we're at this point. Mueller, a year in, 14 indictments, including the indictment of the president's campaign manager, 5 guilty pleas, and as we've seen on reports, a lot of questions that still need to be answered.
Many questions, but just to put a point on this, and then I want to move on to another question about the same subject. Still, as far as the public knows, no evidence of anybody in the Trump team accepting the offers of help. No evidence of actual conspiracy that we know of yet, that we in the public know of yet, and you're not willing to comment on whether or not you've seen evidence of that conspiracy.
What we're going to do in our investigation, collusion will be the last issue. We've dealt with election security. We've reconfirmed the findings of the Intelligence Community assessment. We're going to deal with the social media issues. And yes, we have to get to the conclusion issue. As well as, obviously, the Mueller investigation has to be able to continue. And this is the point, Jake, that just amazes me. The president and his allies constantly trying to undermine these investigations. Well, if the president's got nothing to hide, let these investigations finish.
Well, I want to talk about that because one of the points that you've been trying to make is they're trying to undermine it by revealing the identity of somebody who was a confidential informant for the FBI. Reports in the Times suggest that this FBI informant met with 2 Trump aides during the campaign. The president tweeted, quote, "Reports are there was indeed at least one FBI representative implanted for political purposes into my campaign for president. It took place fairly early on and long before the phony Russia hoax became a hot fake news story. If true, all-time biggest political scandal." Was this individual, this informant, was he or she implanted into the Trump campaign?
I do not, I've not seen any evidence of that kind of truth of the claim the president's made. Matter of fact, his attorney, Mr. Giuliani, I understand, backed off some of that. But let's go to the heart of what the president and his allies, some of his allies in the House, are starting to do.
Devin Nunes and others,
What his allies are trying to do. The first thing you learn when you get involved with the intelligence community is you have to protect sources and methods. People's lives depend upon it. Matter of fact, Mr. Trump's own FBI director this week, Christopher Wray, said when officials or elected officials go out and start exposing classified information, exposing informants that work with our government, America is less safe. That is illegal if you reveal this kind of information.
You think if Devin Nunes reveals the name of this informant, he will be breaking the law?
I think that if any individual, elected official or otherwise, knowingly reveals a classified piece of information about an FBI source, you are breaking the law and should be fully prosecuted.
Have you seen any evidence that this individual was implanted into, because this is what the conservatives are saying, that the Trump supporters are saying, including people like Devin Nunes. The idea is that the FBI put somebody in there to trump up this whole investigation.
I would find that extraordinarily hard to believe.
And you've seen no evidence of it?
I would find that extraordinarily hard to believe. What we do know is there was constant outreach from the Russians, not just to Trump Jr., Papadopoulos, potentially others. And there was a lot of willingness. Now, was there this willingness to actually connect the dots? That's where the investigation, Mueller investigation, our investigation will continue to look at.
What role did the informant play in
is,
launching the investigation? Was the informant, what we've been told is that Papadopoulos' meeting with the Australian diplomat, in which he said that somebody with ties to the Kremlin told him about the Hillary emails, that was the linchpin for the investigation. But I don't know what the timeline is in terms of this informant, and I don't know what role he played in the launch of Operation Crossfire Hurricane.
I believe there was a whole series of information that our government received, or at least law enforcement received, that made them start this investigation. And
including the informant.
I'm not going to get into this particulars. That's not appropriate. That would be doing exactly what I said is inappropriate to do. But what we do know is that the conclusion that was reached by both the Obama intelligence officials and the Trump intelligence officials that said, the Russians were trying to influence, to help Trump and hurt Clinton, that has all been reconfirmed.
So lastly, I know you've been very concerned about President Trump talking about wanting to help China with this telecom giant, ZTE, get access to the United States. What exactly is your concern?
Well, first of all, the president claims he's out for American jobs. One area I thought I might agree with him on is taking a stronger stand against China, and particularly calling out a company like ZTE that his intelligence officials have said poses a national security threat. Once he took an action positively, then he immediately backs off and says he's suddenly concerned about Chinese jobs instead. To me, that's outrageous. And we owe a responsibility, not just with ZTE, but with other Chinese companies that are penetrating our systems, for the intelligence community to be more forthcoming to the American public, to make sure that we in effect inform the public and inform businesses. And the fact that the president stepped away from that claim and is just using this as a bargaining chip, that is not in the best interest for our national security.
Are you going to try to stop it legislatively?
I think that we need to take every tool we can to make sure that whether it's CTE or other firms that are in effect stealing our intellectual property, penetrating our systems, that we take appropriate action.
Senator Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, thank you so much, sir. Good to see you as always.